Hello guys, welcome back. Now today, we're going to be talking about Patrik Laine and the trade rumors of him possibly getting traded out of Winnipeg. Now Patrik Laine has been on a horrendous slump since November, being one of Winnipeg's worst forwards in that stretch. So does he still fit in Winnipeg and will he get traded? Watch till the end to find out. Now, Patrik Laine on paper has been one of the most talented players to enter into the NHL in the past 3 years, possessing almost ungodly goal-scoring talents. And in the first 2 years of his career, we saw that. He was scoring goals and points pretty much in bunches. Now, in his past 2 seasons, he's been very impressive goal scoring and points wise. He's played 155 games in his first 2 seasons, getting 80 goals, 54 assists for 134 points. And coming into this season, he was coming off a 44 goal season, so he was looked at as a guy that could maybe reach 50 goals if he went throughout the whole season just bursting. And this season was looked at as a season that really Patrik Laine could contend with Alex Ovechkin for that #1 goal scoring spots. But this season, it really hasn't come up that way. Now, for me personally, heading into the year, I predicted Patrik Laine to get the most goals in the NHL. I think I had him at like 50 or 55 or something. I thought Alex Ovechkin would be dethroned a little bit when it came to the goal scoring, but Patrik Laine I thought was the guy to do it this year, and I thought this was his year to do it. He had a little bit of slumping in that second year, and even though he did reach a pretty good goal amount, he was still a little bit slumping, so I felt like this year was a year that Patrik Laine could really surpass Alex Ovechkin, and while the race would have been close, I thought Patrik Laine was going to beat it out. Now, to say Patrik Laine has struggled a little bit recently would be a massive understatement. He started off the season pretty well in the first 2 months. He was scoring goals as usual. He was getting points as usual. But since November, he has been an absolute tire fire and one of the worst forwards on Winnipeg. Now, I have some stats to back that up. With Patrik Laine's start of the season, in its first 24 games, he ended up getting 21 goals, 3 assists for 24 points. A point per game, 21 goals, there's really nothing to really complain about there. And even though Patrik Laine was showing signs of zero defense, zero all-around game, he was still scoring the goals like he usually was, and that season, at that point, was looking pretty good. But since that month of November closed, and since December 1st, Patrik Laine has played 26 games, getting 4 goals, 6 assists for 10 points. Absolutely trash numbers for a guy that was looked at as a guy that could compete with Alex Ovechkin for goals this season. And while he got out to an amazing start, I mean 21 goals in 24 games, you really can't complain about that. But after that month of November, it just seemed like an absolute spike down for Patrik Laine, and there was no more goals, there was no more assists, there was pretty much nothing at that point. But the sudden decline of Patrik Laine has been really baffling this season. Again, in his first 24 games, he got 21 goals, and then in his next 26 games, he has only gotten 4. And last night, versus the Columbus Blue Jackets, he was once again held scoreless, and while he did have more ice time than the game prior, it still was not very pretty for him. So, obviously, the first couple of months for the season were going pretty well for him, and then something happened, maybe he was injured or something, but with Patrik Laine, he's been absolutely trash since November, and while he isn't even getting too many points, he's just not playing well whatsoever. Now, with how Patrik Laine has performed over the last couple of months and how Winnipeg Jets have kind of been a little bit disappointing, there's been a lot of trade rumors that have been swirling around him and if he'll actually get traded. Now, with Patrik Laine, he is a lethal goal scorer. We've seen that in the past. Patrik Laine is also a guy that desperately feeds off scoring chances. If he doesn't get that golden opportunity, he simply will not score. And with Patrik Laine, he has talent to deke, he has talent to get on the offensive zone, but he is much more of a shooter first. He has much more of that shooter mentality, but if he doesn't get that great opportunity from guys like Wylie or Shifley, he simply will not score, and we've seen that over the past couple of months. But it was this kind of same situation where with Patrik Laine last year, he had that big slump, and then once Winnipeg acquired Paul Stastny, it seemed like Patrik Laine was a completely different player. And at that second half and the playoffs, both Paul Stastny and Patrik Laine were working together beautifully, and it seemed like that duo was really a force to be reckoned with. And it definitely was throughout that season when Stastny was with Winnipeg. But of course, Stastny ended up leaving for the Vegas Golden Knights, and it seems like that hole for Winnipeg has yet to be filled. Now, pretty much Patrik Laine has been playing with Brian Little pretty much throughout this whole season, but that movement hasn't changed, and that's something that I see wanting to change, because with Patrik Laine, it's just not working right now. With Patrik Laine and Paul Maurice's relationship, we've seen it sour over the last few days. The game versus Columbus, they actually played Columbus 2 times this week, but the first game versus Columbus, Patrik Laine actually only played 10 games. He only got 3 shifts in the second period, something like that, but his ice time was pretty much cut in half. The next game was a little bit better. The next game they played versus Columbus, he ended up playing 16 minutes, so it wasn't completely terrible, but we see the faith in Patrik Laine continuing to dwindle, especially with the coaching staff in Winnipeg, as he continues to not play well, as he continues to not even get goals. And of course, with Patrik Laine, his bread and butter is scoring goals, but he isn't even doing that anymore. Now, Patrik Laine early on in his career has kind of reminded me of a young Alex Ovechkin in the sense that they can pretty much only score goals. With Alex Ovechkin early on his career, he really scored goals and did pretty much nothing else. And that's pretty much what Patrik Laine is doing besides the scoring goals. At least Alex Ovechkin was scoring the goals early on and was being an absolute monster. But right now this season with Patrik Laine, even though the goals overall have been pretty solid, he's just not getting it done right now. So he doesn't even have that upside of scoring goals because right now he's just playing trash in general. And Laine's current slump has sparked a lot of concern around the hockey world with me, other hockey fans, and other hockey analysts, to a point where a Patrik Laine trade might not be so crazy after all. Now, Nick Kypreos of Sportsnet joined Sportsnet Hockey Central to talk about Patrik Laine and his future with the Winnipeg Jets, and he dropped some juicy info about a potential contract and a potential trade. Now, when it came to a potential contract for Patrik Laine, Nick Kypreos said this: will he sign a 6, 7, 8-year deal? Not a chance. That is a big bomb on Nick Kypreos, and even though with Patrik Laine, I never got the sense that Winnipeg would sign him for that long, that is pretty crucial information, because if Winnipeg only signs him for like a 2 or 3-year deal, that could create some spiciness there and maybe a lot of trade rumors down the line. When it came to a possible trade for Patrik Laine, he said, "I don't see him staying in Winnipeg for too much longer." That is an absolutely powerful quote, and that's what sparked this video idea, and that's what sparked this video. But that means that Patrik Laine, while he might not get traded this season, that could mean that Patrik Laine and the relationship with Winnipeg could get sour down the line, and might already be sour on this team right now. So with the Winnipeg Jets and Patrik Laine, it is going to be a very good story to watch, especially with him being an RFA this offseason. How that contract negotiation goes, how long he signs for, and of course, if he potentially gets traded. Now, Patrik Laine was always thought to be a cornerstone for the Winnipeg Jets franchise ever since he was drafted 2nd overall back in the 2016 NHL draft. But since then, of course, with this season, he's got that terrible slump. We've seen continuing decreasing ice time. So for me right now, while I don't think he will get traded, I'm not exactly sure anymore. And while for me personally, I don't see Patrik Laine getting traded, that doesn't mean that it can't happen. We've seen some star players being traded before, we've seen some young star players being traded before, so for me it is unlikely, but if Winnipeg wants to move on from him actually and wants to get away from that one-dimensional player, I could see it actually happening, and while again it is unlikely, it still is possible. But while I think a lot of teams would love to have a Patrik Laine on their team, there's also the question of how many teams want that one-dimensional goal scorer. And again, it kind of reminds me of Alex Ovechkin back in his young days, how he would just score goals, and that's pretty much what he did. But with Patrik Laine, there is some concern there, especially since he isn't scoring the goals right now, and he hasn't for practically 2 months. So for Patrik Laine, it's going to be interesting to see if he actually gets some trade interest, if Winnipeg actually wants to trade him, whether it's now or later. But how many teams will actually want him? Because that will be the true tale, because a lot of teams maybe don't want that one-dimensional guy, even if he might score 40 to 50 goals a year. But whatever Winnipeg ends up signing him for this offseason is going to be really interesting. Would you pay a guy like that $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million? Or would you go more conservative? Or would you go more higher? For Winnipeg, it's going to be really interesting to see how they settle on it, how Patrik Laine ends up actually getting paid, because I agree with Nick Kypreos here that it will be a shorter term deal. More like 3, maybe 4 years at max. But even with that, he's probably going to get paid a pretty handsome amount. But would you pay him up to $10 million? I don't really think so. Personally, I would probably go 9 at most, because he hasn't shown to do a lot of other different stuff like players that are getting paid that much to do. But for me, if I was GM of the Winnipeg Jets, if I was Kevin Cheveldayoff, I would pay Patrik Laine at max $9 million right now, especially since you can probably get him for a lower cost since he is an RFA. For me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of him. I see him as pretty much one-dimensional player, and we've seen that, especially over the last couple of months. So for me, I would pay him $9 million max, and if he were to get lower than that, the trade value might just be there for him. But while I still see it unlikely that Patrik Laine will get traded anytime soon, there are quite a few teams that could definitely use that scoring superstar that Patrik Laine has shown to be in the past. So while he has been on this big slump, and I say his trade value has been declining, he still has massive trade value for a goal scorer at age 20. Now, as I said before, I think a lot of teams would take a guy like Patrik Laine, but I narrowed it down to 3 teams that, if Patrik Laine were actually available, I could see him going to. Now, the first one is the Carolina Hurricanes, and by the time Patrik Laine is available, Carolina might be a pretty solid team, but I still think that a team like Carolina could definitely use that amazing superstar. And even though Sebastian Aho, I think, is the better player overall than Patrik Laine, and he's been amazing so far this season, if you had Sebastian Aho and Patrik Laine on the same team, that would be absolutely lethal. Now, the next team that I think Patrik Laine could definitely fit on is the New York Rangers. They've been looking for that absolute superstar for quite a long time, especially in the forward group, and a guy like Patrik Laine at that time would be amazing ad for New York Rangers. And even though, again, I still don't see Winnipeg trading a guy like Laine, New York would be a pretty solid fit, and having that extra scoring punch could really help their franchise. Now, the last team out of the 3 that I'm going to mention is the New Jersey Devils. They're a team that I think could desperately use a guy like Patrik Laine right now. And again, Patrik Laine being on that slump, I don't think it really matters for New Jersey because they need a guy like that. And even though Taylor Hall's been pretty solid, he's been pretty unhealthy so far this season. But a guy like Patrik Laine being put on that New Jersey team, well, again, I think a lot of teams could use a guy like Patrik Laine. Not a lot of other teams deserve it or need it as much as the New Jersey Devils. I mean, they've been lagging some of that scoring punch, especially this season. But a guy like Patrik Laine would desperately bring what is needed to that New Jersey lineup. But is it likely that Patrik Laine will get traded? Absolutely not. But it's not exactly impossible. Especially with the tensions that have been building in Winnipeg, patience will be really key for Winnipeg if they want to keep Laine long term. For me personally, I still see Laine as having amazing goal-scoring talent, potentially being the best goal scorer of this next generation. I still see that in a guy like Patrik Laine, and even though he isn't the greatest player on paper, he isn't the greatest all-around player, I still see him as a major goal-scoring threat. And even though he's been on that current slump, I think he will eventually get out of it. But with Winnipeg, patience will really be key in this negotiation for Winnipeg, for really Laine's morale this season, going into the negotiations, and of course, going into next season. It's really be key for Winnipeg to stay patient with him, especially with his current slump. But whether Patrik Laine is traded or not, Winnipeg needs to handle this situation very carefully before it's too late. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what did you think about Patrik Laine? What do you think about Patrik Laine's current slump right now? And do you see him actually getting traded? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this card right in here to watch my reaction to the Jake Muzzin going to the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that is going for it, guys. If you guys enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Can comment down below your thoughts on Patrik Laine and if you'll get traded. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.